Yes. Okay. So yeah, following on from this morning, looking at economic models, really looking at how we make decisions and daring to ask the question that if our decision making model is so great, how come we're making such terribly bad decisions? As in, the externalities of the market based system is destroying the natural world at an accelerating rate, climate change, blah, blah. Australia on fire, America on fire, all these kind of things. It's not good. It's not, these are not the signs of a happy system. We've already said that. Viral storms, probably, maybe nature isn't happy. Okay. What the hell can we do about that is it's not a single problem. What we're experiencing is the symptoms of a much bigger problem, which we've already talked about that. And chasing after the symptoms isn't going to solve it. We might be able to ameliorate the impacts, lessen the impact slightly, or run around wearing masks or something, but it doesn't change the fact that we've eroded the microbiome of our planet so much that it's kind of fighting back. So we're on the edge of a new reality, and at the beginning of this course, I invited you to embrace change and to say that change is the certainty. That's the only certainty we've got, and that's what we're going to have to work with. And change, as much as it's difficult, creates new opportunities. So I had a little bit of Radio 4 news in the car on the way over, and I heard Rishi Sunak is his name, the Chancellor, saying is, well, okay, we can carry on propping up businesses that have a chance of being viable in the post-corona world, but the ones that really aren't looking good is why are we still sort of mothballing businesses that clearly don't have a future? Now, I don't know what he meant about that, but the first thing I thought of was, why did you bail out cruise ships? Why did you bail out airlines? Because I don't think those enterprises have a future in a climate changed world, let alone a corona changed world. So I think they're now beginning to realize there's going to be a massive pruning of the kinds of enterprises that make sense and the kinds that don't make sense. And again, I might have already touched on this. I forget that is, in the 80s, in the early part of the 80s, those of us that are old enough to remember, they pruned the old industrial economy, the shipbuilding, the mining, coal mining, steel making, the big old blue collar unionized industries, just allowed to, prune. So we're moving on from all of that. And the workers were told to get on their bike and find a new job. Well, I wonder how it's going to be with the oil industry, the car industry, the petrochemicals industry, and the agricultural sort of agrochemicals sort of world. And anyway, I'm just speculating. And I just so happened to get and posted it. I think, yeah, it's within the talk. Was that quite a positive little movie that's come out called, was it Kiss the Earth? Really showing how our changing our relationship with the soil and turning that into a massive carbon soak is essentially our main aim. I've been saying that for years, but also is there's many different approaches to how we might do that, and I think that really resonated with the bigger idea that I'm pushing over today, or which our principle of the day is, which is about small and slow solutions. Is there's no single answer. There's no right thing to do. There's no magic button that we're going to press to suddenly reset, get everything back to. And even if we thought we knew the right thing is, if we do anything at a massive scale, if it isn't completely right, it's going to create massive problems of its own. So the answer to the question, what is a huge, massive problem accelerating over the horizon? What do we do? And the answer is we unleash millions of small and slow solutions that feed back on themselves, that if they work, they grow in a sort of that spiral, that sort of pattern. They can allow to develop and grow and learn, presenting their own evolution. Or if they're not very good ideas, then okay, we tried something. And maybe often our small scale failures are the learning things, which then gives us an idea, germ of idea for something that might be better. When we were doing the One School, One Planet project, I came away really thinking, and I never really got a chance to put this view over, but I still think it quite deeply, is for every 15-year-old in the country right now, every 15, 16-year-old, they should be encouraged from within their learning, from in there, wherever they are within their education, to go away and think about their own small and slow solution. What's their idea? What is it that they've noticed within their life experience, whether it's at school, at home, on the high street, in their imagination? And if they've got an idea and they can articulate it, write it down, draw a picture, do a web post or a blog, or whatever it takes, draw and make a model. If you can communicate what your idea is, take that to your school, take that, and the school will take that to local authority, the school will take that to the local authority, take that to the government, and if you need some help to action your small and slow solutions in any way, the answer is yes. Yes. You need some money? Yes. You need some time off work? Yes. You need to go and meet some particular professor somewhere to ask some questions? Yes. You need to, I don't know, whatever it is. We owe it to them. We owe it to that generation. They've had everything else taken away from them. They've had their free education, free healthcare taken away from them. They've had, they've been entrapped in debt. They told them growing into a climate change world. We've had the whole energy system that's given us a certain kind of lifestyle is now going to have to be changed. We have to invest in the next generation with everything that we've got to come up with a new formula, a new way of doing it. And there's no way anyone could possibly know what that is. So you have to go to the scatter pattern. Think of that in our patterns. You need to go to random assembly. We don't know the answer. We need to test out millions of them. And there's millions of young people in the world. And we could empower them to just set that in motion. That's my vision. A sort of like literally a storm of trillions of ideas, some not very good, some just basically, trying things out, basic learning. But the collective impact of that is, if they're all informed by permaculture, informed by reality, they're being tested by reality, is they're going to sequestrate some carbon, they're going to plant some trees, they're going to build community connections, they're going to remove things from the waste stream, they're going to and somehow create more soil, or think of 1,000 things that they might be able to achieve. So I think the thing that we possibly need to engineer, the thing that I want to put out there to the world really is, there's words and there's understanding and there's action, and action's really what it's about. Of course it needs to be informed, and of course it needs to be coordinated, but we need to allow everybody to have a run at this. Whether it's just growing some food, whether it's just to say any small thing that it might be, but imagine that in some way it connects you, it grounds you, it inspires you, it makes you see perhaps steps going forward. So I think that this is as our gift to the next generation, our moonshot, whatever, is that. I'll tell a short story. And it's about, and maybe you know it, maybe you don't. And imagine the area, the time of the settlers arriving in the east coast of America, New England, and they started pushing west into the wilderness, reaching the bigger rivers and the tributaries, and slowly moving into the interior of America, and whenever that was in the 18th century, 1700s or whatever. There was a character at that time called, he had a folk name, I forget what his real name was. He was known as Johnny Appleseed. And he was a propagator of apple trees. Now, the apple tree does not come from North America. It is non-native to America. It comes from Kazakhstan or something like that. I think it's Kazakhstan, is it? Or one of those. Anyway, one of the Central Asian mountainous stands. And it's a tree. No, there's if you go high up into the mountains in Kazakhstan and you look around, you'll find wild apple forests with loads of different trees, crazy trees, some 100 foot high, some with massive apples, some with small bitter apples. And so the genetic diversity, the genome of the apple tree lives there. And obviously only certain varieties made it to the Americas, and none of those were indigenous or native. So what this particular individual realized was that they needed to create new varieties of apple to suit the new changed realities that they were in. They'd sailed across the Atlantic. They'd arrived in a new world. The new world that we are arriving is the post-corona, post-climate change world. So we need to create some new genetics. We need some new ideas and concepts that are going to fit, that have a possibility of flourishing in this new changed world. What Johnny Appleseed realized was that he needed to open pollinate apples, not we talked about chip budding and grafting and things when we were at Cultivate. The only way that you can maintain a Golden Delicious or a Granny Smith is to take a piece of the scion, a bit of the genetic material of the tree, and propagate it physically. If you open pollinate, especially apple trees, you get totally new varieties. They bear no relation to the adults. There's lots of dormant chromosomes in apple seeds, apple genome, and so when they open pollinate, you really get a totally new combination. So what our hero Johnny Appleseed did was, now largely also the settlers of New England were growing apples not for dessert apples, because many of them were small, hard, bitter apples, kind of spitters as they call them, crab apples. And what they did with them was juice them and ferment that juice into cider. That was what kept them, fortified them back in those tough days. So Johnny Appleseed would take the pith. He would be famously, the image of him is paddling upriver, going away from the settlement, away from where there's already a civilized European society, and he was more down with the First Nations. He used to hang with hang with the Indians, that kind of thing. And you'd see him in his sort of bedraggled, worn clothes with his two canoes. His one canoe with him in it, his dog and his rifle, I guess, and his bag of stuff. And the other canoe was full of apple pith. And he would arrive a little bit further upstream, usually where a confluence, where a tributary was arriving at the main river, and he'd plant an apple orchard. And he would sprout all the seeds from the pith that he brought and plant, I don't know, hundreds, maybe thousands of original new varieties of apples. And then what happened was 2-3 years later, the settlers would arrive, the next frontier, the next sort of the extension of the frontier. The settlers would come, and now he was ready with his apple orchard, with his business. He can sell his apples, supply them into the community. I even think that settlers had to buy or had to plant certain plants on their land to get, to win their parcel of land from the whatever it was, from the authority that was managing that. So years later, decades later, 100 years later, people started going back and looking and finding some of the orchards that Johnny Appleseed had created. Obviously, he'd sold a lot of the trees, but there were places where loads had been left or people had planted on his trees. And in amongst them, you might notice that, all the kids from the neighborhood, when they go scrumping, they always go off that one tree. Why is that? You go and look at it. Sweet, juicy apples. Wow, say 99% of wild apples are pretty hard and bitter, and it says strictly for juicing only, cider only. Every now and again, you get these sweet dessert apples, and those are really rare and you could propagate from. So the guy had the first, I don't know, Golden Delicious or Bramley or something, made a fortune, because then there's the new genetic material now ready to create an apple that suits the new environment that meets human need. That's what we have to do. That's what small and slow solutions means. It means we create new genetics, we create new possibilities by trying out thousands of new ideas and harvesting the best ones. I showed you that cycle yesterday, I think. But you generate loads of ideas. It doesn't matter whether they're good or bad, but then you select which ones actually meet my needs. This is a really big tree. I need big trees. This is a fast-growing tree. I need fast-growing trees. This is a juicy apple. That you're selecting for the characteristics that you want. And especially when you're at a stage where you don't know what you want, because you're in a new reality, is scatter pattern. That's what nature would do. It would just saturate the land with seeds and see which ones come up. That's what I mean by small and slow solutions. That's what I think that this is what our nation's children should be challenged to do. If only I could find a way to more loudly communicate that idea, I would be doing it. But I think that you can see how that makes sense, right? That's absolutely clearly is, let's just say, do you know what? This older generation, we've run out of ideas. We don't know really how to get out of this. We're in a mess. Here's the rules of nature. Let's re-roll the dice, and let's just generate 1 million, billion, 7 billion new ideas or a billion new ideas from the next generation, because frankly, they probably heard enough from us. We're too limited in our way of thinking to be able to embrace fully what comes next. Wow, so there's a big opening. That's my opening monologue. I thought about that in the car on the way over, man. No, it's in the back of my mind all the time, and I think it is. We have to be positive about this as permaculture designers. We can't just curl up in a ball and cry. We've got to go, yeah, okay, the world's always changed. There's been ice ages, there's been volcanoes, and our grandparents went through world wars and stuff like that. So now, okay, we're at a point of pivotal change. Bring it on. Okay. Do you know what? The old reality wasn't that great anyway. So we're going to spend the rest of our life watching celebrities dance badly, are we, on TV or something? Okay. So here's your task. Here's your mission, should you choose to accept it, as they say on Mission Impossible, is I want you to think about your own permaculture learning pathway. How's it going to unfold for you? I'm going to make you the client of your own learning pathway. And I'm going to encourage you to use the Sadimet model, which I've put on the page, the part 2 page, to structure your thinking. Now, I told you design's a process with steps and stages. So I don't want you to, I want you to try and use the process to, I want you to, at this stage, be open to anything because you haven't thought about it yet. You don't know. And what we might be aiming for and going to is, we're also looking for some stepping stones. I want kind of short-term, medium-term, and longer-term kind of objectives. So let's see how the model works for this, how it might work for you, and how we might apply it to you. So, okay, we're gathering new information. We're doing a survey. What are we surveying? Well, firstly, it's the client. That's you. First things we really want to understand about the client, which I want you to ask yourselves, is what are your goals? In relationship to to this bigger thing of what we're talking about. So within that, you might have some short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. So let's say I want to have my diploma in 5 years and be a permaculture teacher. Or in 3 years, I want to have planted and designed my first forest garden. Or by next week, I want to have gone and visited Babinswood Farm, or emailed Ian at Trevlack Farm, something like that. But we can, maybe more specifically, those things are the things which we break down, right? That's our thing. Let's think about the longer term goals. Can you agree? What are your long term goals? Can you imagine where you, especially within your permaculture ambition, where you might want to be in let's say 10 years time? It was an enormous thing when we first went to Chicken Shack and saw the land there and was trying to visualize. I was so excited to even think about that, what it could be like in 10 years time, to see things not as they are, but as they will be, it says in Principle 12. So, and also is, have a little think, a brainstorm about what resources the client has and the constraints. So under resources, you might have a ton of cash, or you might have some real skills. You might have a shed full of really good woodworking tools. I don't know. Ask yourself that in a structured way. Take yourself through that process. So I asked you also to think about, how are you going to bring permaculture into your life? What areas might you need more detail, and what kind of experience you need to get, or what networks you might need to connect you to where you want to go. So there's a chance to think about that in a more, say, a sort of customer client relationship. I mean, give yourself to sort of role play that a little bit. So you're being the designer, but you're also acting as the client, and be realistic. It doesn't have to be. And the degree to which you might want to share this with the rest of us in the group is up to you. I think, because if it turns into something that's quite personal, then it's your business. We don't want to pry, but let's think about, we're in a group. So I don't know how the site survey works. It depends. If you're thinking about your ambitions in terms of some of that might express itself, in your backyard, in your front garden, in a community garden. So some of your ambitions, although you might be thinking, your goals might be more abstract, they're still going to manifest themselves in real places. So if I was to be asking myself this question, say 12 years ago when I arrived in Llanfwllyn, when I'd crossed the Atlantic Ocean, I'd crossed the Cambrian Mountains and arrived in a new area, I was bringing a certain set of skills and resources with me that I had from where I had previously. And I had a chance to apply some of those, firstly through the workhouse, and then secondly through places like Caibodvac, which I didn't know, or even Newtown. And what are the areas of leaks? What are the things that soak up your energy that maybe keep you away from achieving your long-term goals because your time's taken up by lots of other things? That doesn't have to be bad things, but they're also, it's about naming it and owning it and noticing it, you know. Sometimes a lot of our time and our energy gets soaked up by, I don't know, whatever it is. Is it commuting? Is it things that we really like doing, so that's kind of okay, or things that we really don't like doing, and maybe by having a plan we might be able to make some changes. Observed experiences, don't know, it's a funny way, isn't it? Okay, actually you can look to the knowledge from elders, maybe other people who are in the same, you know, what did Bill Mollison do, what did Jeff Lawton do? What did Masanobu Fukuoka do? We have elders, permaculture elders. There's a massive casebook of textbooks of case studies. I was thinking about that wonderful American Chinese guy, Chinese American guy, John D. Liu. He was involved in the Loess Plateau restoration in China, and he's part of big ecological restoration camps. And there's people out that we can learn from. Maybe we could go and within our plan, we might want to go and involve ourselves in something like that, whether it's local, national, international, that's your choice. But there's chances to learn. Because I'm thinking about, it's just going back to where I am and what I'm trying to achieve is, I don't really know, you know, I mean, I suppose I'm trying to contribute to these processes. I'm thinking about, I'm calling this Permaculture Academy, you notice. So I think what I want to do is to retain relationships with people, to have ongoing conversations in different ways as people on their journey to wherever it is that they're going. You don't have to have the destination of being a teacher or a farmer or any of those things, but think about how we might be able to enable each other, support each other, and how your experience might be of great use to someone who's coming up in your footsteps. I like very much the idea of peer-to-peer learning or sort of informal learning structures where people maybe just gravitate towards those people who resonate with them, make sense with them. So all of that, I think, would be a really interesting kind of thing to do, a kind of a personal survey. Now, I showed you my river of life as well at the beginning and of the story, and that I find that kind of useful and interesting. Now, I left all the personal stuff out of it. I just focused on the sort of permaculture milestones, educational milestones, or whatever. I didn't put the broken hearts and no, but you know, we've all been on the journey. But it's interesting to think about that in that way and to see it as a continuum. And again, there's an element to which, for me, at a certain age, I felt like my life was just a random series of non-connected events. It just like that happened and then that happened and then I went there and I don't really know why and then I did that. And it was only when I got into permaculture I realized, oh wow, all of those were the stepping stones that brought me here, you know, working on farms and doing a bit of teaching, doing a bit of traveling, being a bit of a hippie, all those things actually, you know, having an open mind, ready to receive new information, all of that suddenly made sense when I came to the thing. So that's part of what I'm hoping, you know, the journey, river of life thing and the survey thing, that you're going to get a little bit of that for yourself from your own perspective, because really the most important thing in terms of changing the world and for me as a teacher is to empower you to go forward and you know, do what you can do and understand it's really baby steps at first. It's taking getting a sense of, oh my god, we're in a new continent, we've sailed over the Atlantic, here we are in New England, it's funny, different, everything looks different, what are we going to do? scatter pattern. Let's try out a bunch of whole new ideas because in a whole new place. Let's allow even the genome of our core crops to evolve, to express themselves in a way that suits the climate and the diseases of North America. So it's an interesting way of thinking about it, isn't it? So then, okay, there's our survey. Now we're going to do some analysis. And I think the analysis part of this could work really well is, okay, what functions does my life design plan need to fulfill? Okay. Analysis is just really listing functions and then listing elements that support the functions. So here we go. Let's just say, okay, when I do my analysis about the functions of my life design is, I want to be a really effective permaculture teacher. There's an objective. Okay, what are the stepping stones? What are the elements and the things that might help you get there? Attending some other courses, interacting with other students, taking part in other courses, maybe helping facilitate, go and visit some projects. Those are elements. Developed a tutor mentor relationship with someone, or go out and have a look. Maybe just attend the permaculture convergence or online COVID friendly whatever convergence. Those are stepping stones. You know, I want to do a diploma. Find out about that. Those would be the stepping stones. Those would be the elements that would help achieve that goal. Okay, we'll need to be teachers. We might want to be able to take this all sorts of different directions. But you can. So I'm very happy with my job in printing. I'm going to carry on doing that. But I would really, really like to be able to bring permaculture elements into that business model. Or I don't know. I'm trying to scratching for ideas. But I think having that clarity of what it is that we're trying to achieve. So again, I very early on in my journey, when I got to the point of wanting to have a greater degree of control of my life, I identified housing as a key thing. And so I spent a lot of time finding out about housing co-ops, going to Radical Roots gatherings, staying in the Green Futures Field at Glastonbury and all those sort of things where I could come across that information. So you can see how if we got a sense of where we want to go, and then we could break down some of the elements that would help fulfill that, that's going to help us get there. And then, have a chat with yourself. Are you just saying stuff, or do you really mean it? Is this for real, or am I just going through an exercise? Can we maybe go back and revisit some of those original thoughts even and challenge ourselves to think, what are our priorities and stuff like that? Because we're in a changing world. So we can think about, how do we create income security if we don't have jobs? Or I can see what Michelle's doing already. I don't know what, I think as you said, care work, Michelle, I think that you did, but then you're also doing, or supporting adults or something. Was that right? Yeah. And then also then getting another string to your bow about growing food. So that to me sounds like a coming together, because you can grow food and care for people at the same time, or care for people whilst growing food. And they're not mutually exclusive, but it adds a dynamism to that. So, and you also, you're associating with the right people in the right place. Hanging out at Cultivate isn't a bad place to learn about food growing. Building a friendship with Sue Stickland or Emma Maxwell is going to help. What are the stepping stones that's going to turn you, Michelle, into an Emma Maxwell or into a Sue Stickland in further down the line? Or I don't know. Someone said that to me, Chris Dixon, actually. He was my mentor. Said to me after one of the courses a few years ago, he'd heard the final presentations. He was quite impressed. He said, "Well, yes, Steve, but how do we create another you? That's what you should be thinking about." And I guess in some ways, the sort of Permaculture Academy thing is trying to think, okay, how do we create a continuum of learning, or allow the momentum of what we've already set in motion through the PDCs? How do we let that keep going? Because you saw what it was like. I come back to Trevlek over all those years, and then there's all that, oh, well, we've done this and with this and all that forward momentum. So that then reinforces, for me, it makes me realize, if I was be doing this exercise, I would probably be wise to build a stronger and deeper relationship with Trevlek Farm. That's not going to serve me badly, is it? And Ian's not wanting me to book and pay deposits and stuff. He's just saying, bring me people, I will sell them food. I mean, he didn't really want to even charge me my bar tab, which was a brave thing, brave thing of his. But because he's, you know, he's happy obviously because you guys have hired his tents and eating his sandwiches, his pies, what have you. And that's a great way for a business to work. So he's got something kind of synergistic happening there, and that's what I need to think of. So it might be real fun then, having done your analysis, to try and come up with a bit of a design for where some of the things that you might want to do next. Now, this is exactly what we've asked of the PDC students in Kumi, the course that we've just done in Eastern Uganda. And of course, they will come to a center. They've learned these ideas, and we're going to send them back home with to go. Don't just go and sit there. It's like, what are you going to do first? Maybe build a compost heap, do a keyhole bed, do something, whatever, sort of achievable things, or start gathering materials that might be useful. And then our team have then gone and visited them at their homesteads to kind of see how they're getting on with that. That worked really well in the refugee settlements. And I think this, maybe what I'm trying to achieve through this is to give you some milestones and some momentum so that when you get home, it's not, oh, you are home already. Okay. When this is over, it's not just like, oh, well, that was that. I'll put that file of notes on the shelf and go back to doing what I was doing before. Is I want you to change. I want to make change, you know, and that change could start so simply. Okay, already, most of you doing sourdough already, but when we start doing the ferments and all of that and sauerkraut, and we feed them to people on the residential courses in the old days, we say, well, look, we changed you already. We changed your microbiome is already changed. It's already, you know, you're already starting to ferment differently. So how can, so it says integrate functions to create relationships. So that means joining things together so you get both things happening at once. Fit systems and elements to fulfill functions. So what I mean by integrate functions to create relationship, that's interesting. Integrate elements to fulfill functions is like having water collection off your tool shed. So there's your tool shed with your spades in it, but it's also helping keep the rain barrel, water barrel full. That's that. But then integrate functions to create relationships. Wouldn't that be interesting to be able to somehow join strategically different areas of your life together? Income generation and fun, or soil building and food growing, or something like that. So lots to think about. Try and use some of the ideas we talked about. Placement as well. Okay, again, we're in a bit of a virtual thing, but are there particular places is the right place to place something, again, to create synergistic, mutually beneficial relationships? Well, that's kind of interesting. Implementation and maintenance, sequence, seasons. We can never do everything at once. So what's the thing we're going to do first? Usually we're doing a review and then we're doing planning. And then, as I say, in a real sense, in a hard landscaping sense, we'd be, you build the path first to get into the garden. You've got to build the enabling things before you actually get to the, you know, the stuff further down the line. So how might that abstract out? Again, you know, thinking about you, Sean, you've got a lot of things you're trying to sort of balance out between aspirations about one planet development, finding home, finding community. You've got a range of skills there with the different things that you're interested in, practical things. How can you order those things synergistically in a way in which you get, you know, you get much more for your input, much more output for your input. You have a longer and lasting effect. Okay, there's tons of ideas. I hope that sets us on our way. Now I need to give you, I think I've got more tips on how to approach the design project, but any questions or thoughts you want to come back with to me on at this point? Why just look for something else?
So all that stuff you've just been talking about, that's our design project, yeah?
Yes.
And we're doing it individually.
Yes. But
Okay.
what maybe, and what, as again, I was thinking about this just a bit earlier, is maybe it would be really nice also is within your plan, it might include meeting up with Lindsay to have a peer-to-peer support meeting at some point. Like you're there as resources to support each other. And you know, we'll make an appointment with me, or think about how you can use. You know, I've tried to show you and link you to other things that can be helpful. So, could we create an event or something ourselves that would enable us to, you know, enable us on that journey? Perhaps we could agree to get together in a couple of months' time, or have a kind of a, because you know I'm the same as you. I'm looking for mutual support. I'm trying to keep my things together as well. So setting sort of little short, you know, medium term engagements is a really good way to keep yourself on the page. I have a policy of, if ever anybody asks me to do a speaking engagement, I always say yes, but it has to be at least 2 months away, because then I can fit it in, sort of thing. It doesn't scare me, but still I get, you know, a few nights before and think, oh my God, why did I say yes to that? And now I've got to go over there. But setting these little targets makes you do things, I find.
So what's the time frame?
I don't know. I think, what I actually think is, I want you to spend a little bit of time thinking about it now, today, tomorrow morning. And instead of starting at 9, we're going to start at 10. And I'm going to allow you to use the hour to just even begin that process. And then you're going to come back and tell me, do you know what, I haven't got a clue how to do this, doesn't make sense. Or you can tell me whether that's somehow you're on your way. Is that okay? Yeah.
I'd like to definitely meet up with everybody at some point in the not too distant future, because I'm really interested to see how like Sean and Michelle's projects go, really, after having spent so much time with you all. It'd be really nice to see how it all pans out. So yeah, I'd like that.
I agree.
And you as well, Steve.
Yeah. I mean, it's just slightly regretful or a shame we can't spend more time together than we have been able to. But then here we are. This is just how it is at this moment in time. But I'm really trying to create strong and lasting links between people, because we're trying to build community. That's what we're trying to do.
Well, we spent 5 hours every day, like sharing a screen together for 2 weeks. It'll be hard to not do that.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
Very much enjoying getting to know people, even in this limited way. And I'm getting more used to it, you know, that actually these are more valid exchanges than, yeah. And I don't know what you think. I've gone back and listened to some of my lectures, because I'm a bit worried it's just me rambling on, speaking into space, but I think it's quite good. I was thinking that's quite interesting, actually, because sometimes I don't know exactly what I'm going to say. It just comes out, you know. It's a stream of consciousness, you know. It's set to pictures.
And I think it's just gone into different directions that I wasn't necessarily expecting.
Yeah.
So for me, every lecture's been really interesting, and I can apply it, or want to look further into things and try and apply them to things. So yeah, good.
That's great, Lindsay. Yeah. So yeah, I hope it's the same for the other two. And it's really interesting to explore that. I'm going to show you an example of someone else's design. And I like to show this one because it's sort of fairly textbook. They didn't go crazy with all the graphics and 3D modeling and stuff. They didn't use drones to map the land, but they stuck to the process. And okay, we're doing something that's more conceptual this time, so maybe it's not quite as relevant. I still think it's interesting to see. And I did a PDC quite some years ago now, a place called Canonfroom Court, which is an intentional community in Herefordshire, a big old Queen Anne house. And we did part of it within that community, and part of it we went into a neighbouring village which was called Bishopsfroom, and there was a young guy, a youngish guy, mid-20s, who wanted to start a community garden. And he showed us this place, and here it is, a little bit of unloved scratchy ground, sort of surrounded on all sides by housing, but in a kind of a small village, sleepy Herefordshire village. And we saw that there's some fruit bushes and some canes and some pile of composty stuff, and there was some evidence of things that had happened there before that we, you know, can only guess about. And he had, how do I, Jack, I think his name was, and he'd done a base map. So again, it's all kind of design start from a very simple base map of what's there. And I'm kind of asking you to do that for yourself, if you like, in terms of your goals, your values, and your ambitions, and your skills and resources. So what we have here is that we've got a north sign, so we've got a sense of the direction. He's named and identified the principal trees and bushes. We can see here we've got some blackberries and some more blackberries and a little ridged area that looked like a potato patch or something, and so forth. There we go. He just literally has recorded what's there, the little structure there. Look, there's the gate. These are all the things that you need to know. We've got it's not to precise scale, but we've got an approximate scale. So it's a very nice, simple, unfussy base map. So I liked that. I thought it was very relevant, just, totally appropriate to the task. And we've noticed all the sort of key things within it. So then they did their sector analysis. They thought about what is the shape of the land and how is it sort of influenced by the forces around it. Okay, so those forces that we can't necessarily control ourselves. So the shape of the land this is the highest bit, is at the top up here, and it sort of slopes across sort of diagonally, and we just shown how that works with a few dotted lines. It's quite simple. And they noticed that the wind mainly came from the west, and he's saying it's filtered by the other existing trees. It's a fairly sheltered site. And also he identified that there's the sun, look, and the sun tracks around east to west just like everywhere else, and so that gives us our solar aspect. So we've got a basic sense of where the wind is, where the sun is, where the slope is, a sense of the shape of the land. That's fundamental. What other things did they notice? So they walked around and they noted site features and anything to do with energy. And again, this is their site survey. They thought it was a sunny site, not particularly shaded, so that's suitable for growing. Sheltered from the winds, which is another good thing for growing. A largely uncultivated clay soil, so maybe hard work, but fertile. But no water source. An uneven ground, overgrown, quite a lot of clearing needed, saplings coming up everywhere. And they noticed in one corner there was some sort of meadow ant nests or wood ant nests, and they thought that might be a possible, sort of zone 5, or there's something interesting going on there in terms of nature. Constraints. Sorry,
I have a question.
Of course.
So when you're talking about that site features and energy and the land map and everything.
Yeah.
So my whole thing will involve land, but obviously right. I haven't got a site yet. So how do I tackle that?
That's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it can be, so you're sort of drawing it a bit like your zone model as it's a concept, because you could draw it as if it's a flat concentric circles, because you don't know, and it's going to have to be shaped around to fit the space. But you can still think about, okay, so you need to think more about the process and less about the final placement of the elements, but you can still work out what it is that you need. So you think, okay, I want to get my 4-acre field that I've always dreamt about, but I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. Okay, I still know that I'm going to need compost, I'm going to need tool shed, you're going to need those things. So, okay. Yeah. Right. And even if you can't answer the questions, like the prevailing wind direction and stuff, you can still ask the question. So you're ready to gather that information when you get there, and you understand that that's going to. So again, the point being is you want to try and avoid going to your site with predetermined fixed ideas, what it's going to look like, because it's going to be shaped by, say, each site is unique. So you're going to have to allow your ideas to morph to fit that. So our constraints are, well, we've only got 120 quid. We've got a few building materials. not a lot. We've got a certain amount of time and labour. You're worried a bit about security because it's in the middle of a village, and they were also concerned, obviously, about the needs of the residents. They can't have big djembe parties or something like that within that thing. So I thought this was cute. This was nice. There's a little notice that they put together. Tools needed, please. The youth clubs needs tools to make a garden for the village hall. If you have any old or unwanted tools, please get back. So that's kind of like a little naive poster drawn by kids, and you can stick that up around in the village. And that's the beginning of your process of announcing that you're coming. Oh, it's a non-threatening thing. The idea of donating some tools for a village, what was it? Village hall garden. So also you're signaling to the community there's something going on, and hopefully inviting them to take part. So there's a first little tiny part of our strategy. What else have we got in terms of resources and achievements so far? Well, he'd already chatted to the Housing Association about the land. They'd had a planning meeting. He'd done his site survey, base map, had some ideas, did a bit of clearing, and raised a little bit of knowledge, a bit of money, and raised some local knowledge. And the other really key resource that they noted was that the skills of Jack and himself and his knowledge as a gardener locally. So there's our little asset list. We're going to take that forward. And here's a concept of some of the thoughts that they had, some ideas. So again, just a chance to let me be a bit creative and to start to imagine, maybe even a little bit like what you might do, Michelle, and in whatever way is relevant to you, is they imagine, but wouldn't it be cool to have a cob oven? We could have little cookout parties. People might like that. He thought about a greenhouse and then thought he'd probably fret about someone throwing a brick at it. So maybe we go for a polytunnel or go for something different. They love the idea of living willow domes, play spaces. They liked whatever it was, a whole bunch of things, open fire cooking, hedge laying. They imagined activities that would build relationships to the community around. So if we have a little cookout, some people come, you start to feel a connection to the garden. This is kind of how it works. So their goals were community involvement and engagement, social enterprise, creating a social space for all, an activity hub for the village, education, training and awareness through a demonstration garden. He saw it as being part of they identified it as part of a transition process, and they'd love to be able to share food with local people whilst creating wildlife habitat. So the more that you can break, I mean, some of it almost sounds a little bit repetitive, but we're breaking down a complex goal into achievable steps and then communicating them in a way in which anyone within the community would go, now I understand your motives for doing that. I don't feel threatened by a community garden now because I understand why you're doing it and what that might look like. It doesn't sound like it's going to be non-stop, raves going on or something. So again, a few more site pictures. In the digital era, you can't take too many photos. There we go. So we now got a real sense of the site and what their objectives are and what the resources are. First thing they thought about was zoning, was to give it some shape. I really liked the zoning idea, actually, because I thought it made a lot of sense. It had an inner logic to it, but also changed the garden around. Is when we went there, all the stuff was sort of down here. And instead, they decided, especially as a community garden, it needed a hub, it needed a home. So they put zone 1 there, the home. Then we go downhill each time through our intensive veg bed area, zone 2. Main crop beds in zone 3, and your soft fruit and fruit trees in zone 4, and then down here in zone 5, there's where our ants are and our bits of wildlife. And you can see also, they imagined settlement here, so they've sketched out what that might look like. They anticipated that if they had a little building, they could catch the water off it, and then they'd have water held at the top of the garden. They began to imagine then what the other, if you like, you start to fit the details now into the pattern now that we've got our zone shape. So then they thought about the paths and water, and the paths and water naturally gave the garden a shape. So this was our entry point. So we're going to make a path that comes in and takes us almost directly to the zone 1 area, to the hub, to the structure. And they thought about maybe just having a little lawn in front of there, not plants or mud, but maybe a place where, you know, sit the baby out or sit and have a picnic or whatever it is that you might be doing, community activities. We've got a little compost loo here. Good location, just between zone 1 and zone 2. It's not too far out of the way, discreetly tucked away behind some trees. So the first thing you come in, you see isn't the toilet, but it's there in the right place. So they imagined that close to the settlement area, people sitting here with the teas, looking after the babies, loads of high detail, attention to detail, kind of zone 1, zone 2 age gardens and beds here. Look, they're slipping in more like the zone 4 plants around the edges. I'm seeing a wild garden, artichokes, comfrey, berries. Good place for the comfrey. Look, they can be continuously harvested and fed to the intensive growing area. They're going to make a little pond there with water that they can trap, and then give it a root out through the bottom of the garden. There's a little wet area down here anyway. So they're working with what's there, adding layers of detail. So here's a main orchard area in the right place, kind of zone 4. They put a dog area over there because they decided they didn't want dogs running around within the garden, but they didn't want to exclude dog owners either. So could we find a solution for that? I think as the zoning idea developed, then their sort of strength of feeling about these other sort of marginal areas developed. So it became very clearer and clearer about where things should go into the design, how it all might fit together. So again, they thought about the sun again, thought about how that might reach the different areas of the garden. And they then, within their presentation, they went through the 12 principles and used them as a reference point to show how they'd organized their thoughts to come up with their garden. That's just the design. So you've now seen the survey, the analysis, the design, see how it steps, see how it's bit by bit, and then it's implementation and maintenance. And again, I always say is, as soon as you plant something, you got to water it. So you got to, as you implement, so must you maintain. And then the final stage, and I love the way that they thought about the workshops, the activities that would help facilitate the implementation, bring people in. And then, of course, the final area, which we always talk about, but it's hard to plan, is your design will not be perfect. Evaluation and tweaking. In fact, so because it's not perfect, you accept feedback and you make minor modifications. That's what tweaks are. They're minor modifications. And this is my sort of assertion really about permaculture, is that if you do the survey and the analysis, and you really do take in that information, and even if in your design and implementation you don't quite get things in the right place and you don't get them quite in the right order, you'll be more right than wrong. Things will mainly be in the right place. It's very unlikely that you'll make massive errors. So the fact that you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to get it all exactly right first time, gives you the freedom to roll with it a bit, you know. And like say with Michelle, I've had friends who designing a garden. He wasn't quite sure how it worked. So he had a lot of perennial plants. He just kept them in the pots for the first few months and shuffled them around and buried them in the mulch, but didn't quite plant them till he was ready. When we were at Chicken Shack, we really wanted the yard in the middle to be an open space, a communal space, more of a people space. But we also understood that big trucks would have to come. You know, you never know, you might need a fire engine or an ambulance to come, and it's got to get up to the house. So you can't just block off access ways. You've got to think about the, you know, irregular things that happen when you might need to change things. So what we did is we just put wooden logs along the edge of the yard, and when cars turned around or delivery lorries came, the logs got shoved to the side, and slowly the ideal turning circle presented itself. You know, we allowed the design to present its own evolution. So you don't have to anticipate everything in advance. You don't have to be right. But once you've got a plan, that's your steering mechanism. That's the thing that you've got to compare to. Am I on the right track? Well, how do I know if I never knew what the track was? Or how has my plan changed? Okay, I hope that helps. I hope that gives you a sort of a thing. And what I would like to do, with your permission tomorrow, is And also because I'm here with my parents, so I'm doing a bit of home support. So an extra hour would benefit everything. So if I see you not at 9 but at 10, but use that time correctly. Don't just well, you can do whatever you like, but I'm not wag my finger at you. No, don't you waste that. Use that time wisely, children. You know what I mean. I'm really ready to hear just a little, especially tomorrow's like our kind of last day of this phase. But I don't want it to end. I think this is a beginning, and I'm interested in your journey. I want to know how it pans out. Whether we talk again in a few weeks or a few years, I genuinely mean that. And I think what I'm trying to do with the academy is to capture these stories and these case studies, and make it easier for people like yourselves to connect with other people who are on a similar path, who just happen to be on a different course. So I'm wondering, again, is half-formed thoughts, but another way which I might work with Trevlac is to have some weekends like we had, but make them more open to people from different courses. And maybe we could say a stronger theme on XYZ, whatever that is, talking about the pasture management or doing some greenwood practicals, or, you know, whatever it is. So so again, and again, within your plans, help me identify those things, because that's what I'm trying to better understand what it is that, you know, what you guys might need on your journeys. Yeah. So there, good, great. So I've shown you a kind of a real design on land that was sort of done in an understandable way using Sedimet. It's no more scary than that. And if you're finding it a bit difficult, again, you know, you can collaborate if you want. I'm not saying you can't, but obviously you know more about what your journey is. So, and because we're all in physically different places, I think trying to make people work together is a little bit complicated. So I decided to do that. And you're helping me evolve and develop the course, because it's slightly different from how we've done it before. And it's going to be really interesting. So great.
That sounds really exciting. I'm very enthused. I'm not overwhelmed, but I'm just really excited by it. So
good, perfect, Michelle.
Yeah.
Great, that's a great answer. Lovely.
I concur.
I am very good. I'm happy to do that. That's one, Lindsay. And you, Sean?
Lots to think about.
Good, good. Well, I've posted that other talk as well, and it's all on there. It takes me an hour to process it, and I'll upload this later, but so that you'll have that as a reference as well. But go back and look at your Sedimet and realize it's about you. It's about how can we use permaculture to get you to where you need to be and to help the world make this transition that it needs to do. We're just sailing across the Atlantic right now, and we're just about to, when we get off the ship in 6 months' time, the other side of the COVID ocean, we are entering a new world. And we're here to support each other to flourish in that new world.
Yep.
Okay.
See you in the morning.
See you in the morning. Sleep well with those thoughts.
Have a good evening.
I will.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye, everyone.
Good night, everyone.